tiny houses and why more people are living in such miniature homes. It's a picture of a tiny barn that has been turned into a house. Ancient tiny barn, ancient tiny houses. Now, tiny houses have been heralded as a radical creative way to address a lack of affordable housing, as well as reducing living costs and shrinking our carbon footprint. This is on The Conversation by Alice Elizabeth Wilson, PhD researcher in sociology, University of York of the UK. She says, my PhD research looks at the tiny house movement in the UK. I'm interested in who lives in them and why, and in the barriers that people face to living in this way. I'm also building my own tiny house at the same time. I'm excited by the idea that people could build their own houses. It's a lot of fun, and have their living costs as well. Have them, making them half. Yet my research is also highlighting that for many people, living in a tiny home is an act of necessity. It's not that they want to live in a mere 5 meter by 5 meter timber box, 5 by 5, that's about 20 feet by 20 feet. It's that they can't afford to do anything else. And for others, even this is out of reach. Downsizing living. Tiny houses are homes usually 40 square meters or less. That's about 120 square feet. A popular construction style is to build them on a trailer base. This allows them to be classified as road towable vehicles and avoids many of the complications of building a permanent home with foundations. Others are log cabin style or shed homes, and some are even built underground. They're much cheaper than traditional housing. The average tiny house price tends to be around £35,000, which is $45,000, and result in much cheaper living costs. This can free up time from the obligation to work to pay rent or a mortgage. Research has suggested that people who live in tiny houses spend more time outside or with friends and family, which can make them happier than their overworked counterparts. However, building a tiny house still requires thousands of pounds and, importantly, somewhere to build this. This means these projects seem mostly to be done by people who do have some savings, access to personal loans, and friends or family who own land. It's just that they don't have enough savings to buy a real house. This means that although tiny houses are considerably more affordable than conventional houses, they're out of reach of the people who are in most dire need of housing. If somebody is unable to save up the average deposit for a brick house, they are not likely to be able to summon this amount for a tiny house either. And what's more, you can't borrow money through conventional mortgages to build tiny houses because they are not attached to land, which is a real asset that appreciates in value over time. Costs and benefits. Instead, tiny houses must be financed via private loans, just like if you wanted to buy a car. Any typical interest rate on the mortgage loan in the UK right now is about 2%. Compare this to the interest you would have to pay on a personal loan to build your tiny house. That's an average of 7%, and it becomes clear how unfavorable the financial landscape is for this type of project. Of course, tiny homes can be built for significantly less than the average price. A participant in my research study built a 10 square meter tiny house for just £900. He loves his home and spends lots of time in it. However, it's built on land that he already owns, another hurdle to overcome, which is easy by material capital. The UK has the longest average working hours in Europe, and a significant portion of earnings go towards housing costs. My participants have described tiny houses as a way to reduce living costs in such a way that they can either work much less or work in more fulfilling jobs for a lower salary. People have expressed to me how they found it strange that they used to work 40 hours a week to pay for a home they were seldom in. People I have spoken to who built tiny homes cite a desire for simplicity and to move away from a life focused on spending and buying. Some have described the work to spend attitude of society as unfulfilling and even harmful. It seems counterintuitive that people would prefer less space to more, and that people would volunteer to live in a shed on wheels if there were enough affordable homes. Yet I have encountered people who do have the money to live in a conventional sized house, but would prefer to live to live tiny and find their goals obstructed by planning, permission, and access to land. Another way to look at the tiny house movement is that it sums up the failures of adequate distribution of resources and access to opportunity. It can be seen to be romanticizing poverty and ignoring structural inequality. The movement is known to be fairly white and middle class, which suggests its radical potential is being overstated. This is on The Conversation. Please tell me what you think. Thank you. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.